Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, at www.themetalpit.org. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And for some video interviews, video shorts, and audio versions of this podcast, please visit our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com at The Metal Pit 666. Tonight my guests tonight are two of my writers at the Metal Pit, Jim and Ken. How are you guys tonight?
Well, we're awesome. Good,
sir. What did you do anything metal this week? Did you listen to any new albums? Did you, Jim? I know you just reviewed Children of Bodom, the live album. Do you want to say something about that on here so people will go read your review on the website?
Oh yeah, what an amazing album. I mean, this is the last live show that they did as their lineup, their finished lineup there. And it was a year before Alexi Laiho passed, unfortunately, but they had broken up, and it's the last show. So what a heck of a recording. I mean, that's probably that. I'd already picked one of my favorite live albums of the year, but then this one is going to creep in on the 15th of December, and I think it's probably going to tie it or overtake it. It's a great album, great production, great crowd participation, and I really hope maybe a DVD follows with it as well. So it's really, really awesome album.
What about you, Ken? Did you do anything metal this week?
No, I was just listening to the album that we're going to talk about here, but no, it was a quiet week for me.
Okay, and I didn't do anything well. I mean, I did stuff metal, whatever, but
yeah.
Okay, so the last episode we went back to 1981 and we talked about Iron Maiden's album Killers. And this week we're going to stay in 1981 and we're going to talk about Ozzy Osbourne's second solo album, Diary of a Madman. And just like Killers, it was the second album, and it was the second on Iron Maiden's album. It was the last album with Paul Di'Anno as a singer, and this album is, of course, the last album with Randy Rhoads because, of course, the next year, 1982, he passed away in a plane crash. And so there was both big changes for Iron Maiden and Ozzy Osbourne after their two albums. So Diary of Madman is the final album with Randy Rhoads. Now, although bassist Rudy Sarzo and drummer Tom Aldridge are credited in the liner notes and pictured on the inner sleeve of the American release of this album, they were not on the album, but I guess they toured with them after or something like that, I think is what it was. But it was Bob Daisley on bass and drummer Lee Kerslake who was on the drums on this album. Aldridge has stated, I think it's pretty obvious that it's not my drumming on this album, and I have never taken credit for that recording. I always give credit to Lee Kerslake because he deserves it, of course. And of course, it's obvious if you recorded the thing, you should get the credit. Daisley provided significant contributions to the album songwriting, having written some of the music and most of the lyrics. Kerslake claims to have also had a hand in the writing of the album, even performing lead vocals on some of the demo recordings of the songs, like Flying High Again. Now, Jim, I know there's a big controversy here with this stuff with Sharon Osbourne, and I don't know who did it all, but you just watched a documentary on Lee Kerslake. Do you want to add anything to this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's a kind of a weird story, and you really find out that, I think Sharon Osbourne was definitely pulling the strings back then. And so Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake actually left the band. I believe they were fired. I believe Kerslake went on to look after his ill mother, but they were never giving any writing credits or even performing credits, like you said. On the album, they went with, in the liner notes and that and the sleeve pictures with Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge, who I both have huge respect for, and especially after the fact that they've publicly always came out and said that they weren't on the actual creation of the album. So that's really neat. But it even goes farther than that. So not only were they shut out of royalties and such with that, they also, they went, Sharon apparently, well, it was Sharon blames Ozzy, Ozzy blames Sharon, but in 2002 they actually did a re-release and what had happened was they actually removed their bass and their drum parts out of it, and they used two different people altogether. They ended up using Randy Rhoads, from Suicidal Tendencies / Metallica for bass, and then they used Mike Bordin from Faith No More for drums. And I believe both of them were touring with Ozzy at the time and have done a lot of work for him. So they actually re-recorded the parts, then re-released the album. And after the album got re-released, there was such a fan outcry for it that they ended up, the record company ended up putting a sticker on it stating the difference of the changes that happened. And then again, I believe it was in 2011 when the 30th anniversary came out, they reinstituted the original players of Lee Kerslake and Bob Daisley back to it. So, and in the documentary with Lee Kerslake, he's kind of exploring his, it's called Not on the Heap. And, everybody obviously knows he's was a longtime drummer for Uriah Heep. His bucket list was to, he always wanted to get credit for his writing and for taking part and his drumming on the actual first two Ozzy albums. And, in the actual documentary, he sends like a letter off to Sharon and Ozzy, and they end up sending him his platinum records. So it was kind of touching and kind of moving that happened. And finally, the Osbourne camp kind of saw the light a bit. I mean, give this poor dying, musician who's a legend, one of his final wishes. And he wanted them for on his wall, and he wanted to leave them to his family. And he wanted, he wants everybody to know he was part of that, which he was a big part of it. I mean, going back when he first joined the band, Kerslake, I mean, they were looking for a drummer, and they were looking, and I believe he was the last drummer they were trying out, and they just it just clicked. And I mean, he's a phenomenal drummer, just like Bob Daisley is an amazing bassist. So, it's just what's right is right, and I think just the kind of the games over the years with this kind of, unfortunately, maybe tarnishes Sharon's sort of business ethics a little bit. And, Ozzy, unfortunately, really probably didn't have much to say. And I know it's written like in his book and that he had said that she did it and she said he did it. But I think it was more along the lines of a little bit of animosity there towards the fact that they ended up going to court over rights and stuff like that. So quite a kerfuffle all the way. However, the newest one, it's been restored. So, and fans had a big hand in that. They spoke up, and metal fans really want to hear the real thing and the real story. Nothing against Robert Trujillo or Mike Bordin, both great musicians in their own, and same with Sarzo and Sarzo and Aldridge. But everybody wants to hear the album the way it was. If you want to remaster it, that's great. But you don't go and re-record like that with totally different people. But anyway, so that's the story. And the good thing is he did get, he got his platinum records prior to his death in 2020, and so that was at least some closure there, I would assume. So.
And Ken, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is I think what started this whole thing off though was that originally it was meant to be a band, not an Ozzy solo record.
Right.
They were originally going to be called Blizzard of Oz. And everyone involved was under the understanding when this thing formed that they were going to be a band. But for whatever reasons, and I think Jim has mentioned it, obviously Sharon and Ozzy, and I'm sure Sharon had a big hand in this, it all kind of changed hands when they went to do the second album. And obviously he shut them out, and it just ultimately became an Ozzy solo record where the guys just contributed it. But yeah, so I think that's where it all kind of started at the beginning of all this.
Well, my thoughts are the worst thing that happened to Ozzy's career was marrying Sharon. But anyway, that's just me. Okay. Now we did that. We did already do a podcast on Blizzard of Oz album, and Jim was on that one. So I guess I'm not gonna ask Jim, and I'm not gonna say when I first heard this album or heard Ozzy. Of course, I think we all heard Ozzy and Black Sabbath, but I'll ask Ken to answer that question. So you want to talk about when you first heard Ozzy or this album or whatever?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because I'm gonna date myself. Like when I was 12 years old, this album came out. So when it came out, I used to have my radio and I used to record Dr. Demento, and I used to record like Lights Out. These were on, like, I believe, Chum FM in Toronto, so they were like radio programs. So I had a tape with Dr. Demento on it, and it was weird. I turned the tape on, and at the end of the tape, it came on Flying High Again, which is the first time I've heard that Ozzy song. And I absolutely loved it. And I can't even recall how I recorded that song. So obviously it was on the radio at the time, and I recorded it. So that was my first introduction to Ozzy, was Flying High Again, and then eventually I got that album and totally got into Ozzy. Then went back eventually as I got a little bit older into Black Sabbath. But yeah, that's where I got my first exposure to Ozzy Osbourne.
Well, so you really heard Ozzy before Black Sabbath?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And then I went back to hear Black Sabbath afterwards.
I can't even if I can't even remember when I got this album or anything about this. I remember Blizzard of Oz because I got that through Columbia House Records for 7 cassettes for $0.01 or whatever. But Jim, you can't say when did you get over? I assume you had Blizzard of Oz and then you just got Over the Mountain when it came out after that or whatever.
No, probably for me, if I can remember, if I told this right on the first podcast, was I think I got Bark at the Moon first, and then went back because it was a little bit later. But I mean, we knew all the Ozzy songs from there, and my first kind of jump into Black Sabbath was I got a Paranoid tape from an older brother for like a pack of smokes or something, and I got that and 74 Jailbreak for AC/DC, and I was blown away by it, and that's when I started delving into a lot of the Sabbath collection. The first Sabbath I really listened to would probably be the Dio era, just because it was closer. I mean, when this album came out I was 10, so I was just kind of getting into heavy metal at that point, so yeah.
Okay. Now I usually, again, I go to that setlist.fm website, which has, set lists from concerts and stuff. But there's really, according to that, they've only played 5 of these songs in concert before, which is weird.
Yeah.
If that's true. And the song, well, we'll get to that later, but I'll mention Diary of Madman. They've only played it 11 times live.
Wow.
Which is kind of strange, you would think, for a title track of an album to not play it live more. Yeah, but anyway, so there is one song from this album that they've played the most live from this album. Any guesses which song it is that they've played the most live?
Number 1, Over the Mountain.
Yeah.
And it's actually Flying High Again.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I think by a long shot too. Actually, I think Over the Mountain might be the second one though. I need to find that. Sorry, keep talking.
Well, they got a lot of radio play, so I could see Flying High Again being the song that they play the most.
Yes. Okay, I can't find it now. I think I lost my. Oh no, there it is. Diary of a Madman album. Yes, Flying High was like 736, and Believer was next at 300, and then Over the Mountain 145, and You Can't Kill Rock and Roll twice.
Wow.
So I don't know how accurate that is, but anyway, that's what it says. Okay, so let's get to the song. So we're going to start off with Over the Mountain, and Ken, I'll let you go first on Over the Mountain.
Oh, this is such a great song. I love this opening song. It's aggressive, it's heavy. I remember reading a lot about what Bob Daisley had said about this because he wrote the lyrics for this song. When they were writing this song, they didn't really have a title for it, so they struggled with what the song or the concept was going to be. But ultimately, this is like a killer song right from the get go of the drums. You get Kerslake on the drums. You get the riffs. You get that sound. It's a great song for me as an opening.
And Jim?
Yeah, I mean, this is classic Ozzy, and I mean, one of the best. I probably in my top 10 songs of Ozzy. And this album, I like this album actually better than the first album, better than the debut. I find it's probably a little bit more. I mean, they were honed up as probably a little bit better of a band for me. But I mean, Over the Mountain, what a way to start off! It's just a ripper of a track, and every like Ken said, this was written, and it wasn't just written by Ozzy. So this is where all that stuff comes into play. But I mean, this was the first. I think this was the second single that was released off the album, and I think it was released in like December of '81. And there's some kind of interesting cover versions. I know I'm not a huge Striper fan, but they do a pretty good cover of it on there. I think they had an album called The Covering or Covering. They do a pretty good cover of it, but this is an awesome. And I think I've seen Ozzy twice and on the same tour, night after night, or within a couple nights of each other in Moncton and Halifax. And I know he played this song, if I remember right, at both those shows. So, but no, this is one of my favorites, and what a way to start off now.
Yes, it is a great. I'm the opposite of you. I like Blizzard of Oz album better than this album.
Oh yeah,
but this could definitely fit on the first album along with the next one too, I think.
Yeah,
but we'll get into that more later. But yes, it is a great way to open the album, and it's typical. And of course, Randy Rhoads' guitar solo is awesome, of course. But I guess you can probably say that about every one of them.
Yeah.
And then we go to the drugged out song, Flying High Again, or at least I assume that's what it's about. I don't really think it could be about anything else. So, Jim, how do you like Flying High Again, the song that is?
Well, the song is assumed to be about marijuana use, but Ozzy has said before that it's about him becoming, like, leaving Sabbath. I mean, he didn't really leave Sabbath, he was forced to leave Sabbath, but his leaving of Sabbath and going out on his own. But I don't know if I totally believe that, because here it is on the second album. But I mean, you've got that. This is an anthemic song. I mean, that riff, Randy is. I mean, on every song we could just gush about Randy Rhoads. But it was really sad that this. I really wish, I know obviously Randy passed, the year later, and the band was pretty much Ozzy, and then he brought in all new people, but I can't imagine, I know probably Randy wasn't going to stay here, but it would have been so cool to see like a third album of what they would have come up with this lineup would have been just amazing. And I think it probably, the next album, Bark the Moon, is a great album. I like it because I was, at the time, it was my first album I got, and I loved the imagery of the cover, and the videos were awesome. But I just can't imagine how good that album probably could have been, and the changes with everything that could have stayed the same. But Flying High Again, phenomenal song. And like I say, that riff is just legendary in it. So, and as soon as you hear it, you know exactly. And with Ozzy's voice is actually really good. I like this album. I think his voice is better on this album than the first album. Yeah. Just my opinion, though.
And Ken, what do you think of the song?
Oh yeah, so I don't have much to say because I think Jim has pretty much said it all. But I will point out that his vocals are a lot better in this record overall than the first album. Again, it's a radio friendly song. It's really, really catchy, and at the time when I first heard it, I totally fell in love with it. So yeah, it's a great song for me.
I mean, I guess none of the lyrics really mention drugs, of course, but he says, "Mama's gonna worry I've been a bad, bad boy. No use saying sorry. It's something that I enjoy. That has nothing to do with leaving Black Sabbath, I don't think." And getting into his solo artist thing, I don't know. Doesn't matter anyway, does it?
Well,
but anyway, yes, that's another great song. I love these first two songs. They're a great way to start the album.
But
now,
Daisley did write the lyrics for the song as well, so I don't know if he maybe I don't know. It's hard to say if it was about drug use, but
Yeah.
And I think originally Kerslake sung it in the demos. I think he
That's
like
right.
I don't know if there's an actual demo of it. I'd love to hear it because he has amazing voice. But apparently, when they were working on it, it was the two of them and Randy, and they were just going through it, and he was doing a lot of the vocals on it, until Ozzy kind of took over. So cool.
Okay, then we go to You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. Now, this is kind of a slow one. And just as I think back when, I listened to this, I didn't really care much about what the title of the song was. But as I'm preparing for the podcast, I'm reading, okay, You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, but it's kind of slow and it's kind of weird. You think if you had a song called You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, that it'd be a hard rocking song, not a kind of slower song or whatever. But Ken, what do you think of You Can't Kill Rock and Roll?
The song is all right. Like I find this is a funny song because lyrically, and I know it's been pointed out and said that they're looking, at least the lyrics sort of want to bring the point of the idea that back in the 80s, rock was being attacked for the idea of Satanism and all the usage of it and the symbolism in the songs. So the song itself is slow and it's okay for me, but just based on the lyrical content, I find it a little bit odd. But it's an okay song, but that's not one that I would want to revisit over and over.
Jim.
Yeah, I love the song. I mean, I love the lyrics in it. Leave me alone. Don't want your promises no more because rock and roll is my religion and my law. So, I mean, you think of the cover of the albums. The cover of the album, I mean, you had the Blizzard of Oz, the first cover, and then you got this one. You got the nice upside down cross in the back there. You actually have his son in the makeup looking out the window or in the mirror there, and Lewis, and it's pretty cool. I mean, kind of taken it to a whole other level here. And I think, this song kind of exactly what Ken said. It's more of a kind of an anti-hater, anti sort of religion song. It doesn't quite attack it. It kind of dances around the edge of it. But I mean, I find it starts off super slow and then it kind of takes off. There's a great guitar solo in it, but there is in every one of these songs. So, but no, I really like it. I think it's a great third track. I mean, you're coming down off the first two. Always the third track is going to be a little bit more kind of a mellowing out and not as rambunctious as the first two usually. So, but great track. I love it.
Yeah, I don't really like the track that much myself, but I do like the guitar solo.
Wicked.
Anyway, then we go to Believer, which is obviously about believing in yourself, I think. And I find this song is kind of closest thing to a Black Sabbath song on this album. It's kind of a little Sabbathy feel, especially at the start. Jim, what do you think of this Believer?
Well, I think it's got like Ozzy's voice on this is it's classically good. I think it's really good. That drum and that guitar intro that kind of play off each other. It sounds cool. And yeah, it does have a bit of that Sabbathy kind of doom sound to it. And yeah, that's exactly what the song's about. It's about believing in yourself. Again, another great song. You said it. I think this was played the second most on this album. You said like live.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Kind of shocked at that, but I don't know if I saw it live. I can't remember, but no, it's another great song. I mean, I love every song on this album. There's not a single song I don't like. So, just gonna tell you now.
Okay, Ken, what do you think of Believer?
Yeah, it's a good song. It's meaty. It's got a lot of really meaty riffs, and as we've all been saying, every song is going to have that. So that's what makes it interesting for me. Yeah, there's a Sabbath connection. It does kind of remind me of a song that Sabbath would have played. So, and I'm not surprised that it's as you mentioned, Blake, it's been played on Setlist FM that many times. So yeah, it's a pretty decent song overall.
And then we have Little Dolls. Ken, what do you think of Little Dolls?
All right, this is an interesting song for me because, well, you're talking about torment, you're talking about suffering, and the consequences of your actions. It all like jam packed into the lyrics. Again, I like the idea of the song because they're sort of covering this concept that a person is being trapped with no way to escape and are being tormented by some unknown assailant. The thing for me though is that the song has a very upbeat kind of positive vibe. So I often wonder the lyrics don't kind of match the song. That's just my opinion, but I'm thinking to myself, well, this is interesting, but I don't mind the song, but I've just for me, I just find the odd juxtaposition of like the kind of like dark lyrics and more of an uppity vibe for me. But it's okay as a song itself.
And Jam.
Oh, well, I thought the song was about Sharon because he's trapped and trying to get away. No, in all seriousness, no. But hearing Ken explain it, I was like, actually, he's right. He's trapped and he's trying to get away. And maybe it's an upbeat song. Maybe she didn't read the lyrics. I don't know. But no, it's that drum intro is fantastic. And this is where Lee like just dominates. And I mean, that drum intro is just amazing. And again, another massive guitar riff, and I mean, I just love it, and it's another great song. It's probably one I don't necessarily play all the time. On this album, I usually let it play through, but if I was to pick them in order, this would be towards the end of the album for me. But I mean, it's still like a 9.5 out of 10 for me. So
Now, I read somebody thought the song was about a voodoo doll.
well, it's possible
Because it says the pins and needles prick the skin of little dolls, and you got your fate is in his hands, So it's like somebody's. So I don't know if this person is on the ball or just going by what he thinks, but songs always can have lots of different meanings, of course, but that's just what that person said. So I thought I'd share that tidbit in case people agree.
That's a good point, because in one of the lyrics it says the little doll is you. Yeah. So I mean, there you go.
Yeah,
you're a genius. You got it.
I guess, yes. Well, I know I'm a genius, but I'm not sure that. Anyway, then we go to another slow one. We have Tonight. And Jim, what do you think of Tonight?
Well, I would classify this as a bit of the ballad, maybe on the album. We haven't really brought up Harry's keyboards, and they're really prevalent in this track. I like it. It's catchy. It's definitely catchy. And the chorus and that's pretty catchy. I like it. And like I say, the keyboards I think add to it. It gives it kind of a little bit of it's a little bit more slower and maybe a little bit more kind of upbeat, but it kind of reminds me of a little bit of a Deep Purple-ish with those keyboards in there. So, but I really, really like it. It's a good song, and we're heading towards kind of the end of the album shortly, and I think it's got a great spot on the album as well too. And I believe this one was Tonight. I think this was the third single release, so they did give it some traction, but I don't think it was released till 1982. So interesting that they would pick this one as maybe the third single off it, and not exactly the last track, which is the title track, which is kind of weird.
And Ken?
Yeah, the song is all right. Again, it's not one of my favorites on the album. Yeah, I think what was noted about a lot of keys on this, especially towards the back end of the song. Again, like looking at Daisley's lyrics, it's all about reflection, and it's interesting in that regards. But I didn't really find the song something I'd want to revisit on this album a few times. But yeah, it's okay. It's an okay song.
Well, I think there is another good solo there near the end, so that kind of saves it for me. And it is a catchy song. I know I listened to it the other day, and then I'm walking around singing it, thinking, but I don't really like this song. Why am I doing this? But anyway, yes, it's saved by Randy's solo again. And then we have SATO. I guess that's how I'm supposed to pronounce it, since there's dots between everyone. So, Ken, how do you like this song? The second last one.
This song actually has a lot of interesting background to it. Because now Daisley wrote this song, and originally it was called Strange Voyage. So when they got kicked out of the band, Sharon and Ozzy decided that they were going to make some changes. So Sato refers to Sharon Arden Thelma Osborne. So it's weird. It's a weird title. I think I prefer the Strange Voyage title a lot more. And I also like the fact that Daisley was talking more about the idea here, again about discovery, about trying to change your life, and what he apparently, from what I read, the song is derived from a Buddhist monk from it's like thousands of years back, who wrote a letter called "The Sea of Suffering," or a ship to cross the Sea of Suffering. So that's where the voyage of the idea of the ship comes in. So it's, again, I always say that a lot of these songs are so lofty with the ideas, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. But it's kind of a shame that, he came up with this title, and then they went ahead and after he got put it out, they changed the title of the song. I like the song. It's adventurous for me. But yeah, I still can't get out of my mind. Just, like, God, they wrote this song and then they have to turn around and just fiddle with it and change it. But yeah, it's a pretty decent song.
Jim, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's got that fast guitar in it. I mean, it's kind of, I agree with Ken being like a lofty, and there's so many different sort of, not really, there's theories like the one Ken had said about it being Sharon, her name or whatever, and then there's a sail around the ocean is another thing online they talk about. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely, writing is different than what I would say you'd typically find on an Ozzy album. So it feels like you could tell. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, I'm sure Ozzy, I'm sure they had, it was written by Daisley. I'm sure Ozzy had some sort of knowledge of what it was about or whatever, but just kind of, it doesn't seem to fit into the line of the album in my mind. But I mean, I love the song. The song's great, and I prefer it not being about Sharon. So I'm gonna go with the sail around the ocean. But no, it's got killer guitar. But I agree with Ken. This is a lofty sort of subject. You read the lyrics, and it's not Flying High Again. It's not off the next album, Bark at the Moon. It's just, and it's not a typical. And I think it would have been better to be called the original title as well. I mean, come on, you got to do things that are right here. It's just I feel sometimes these early Ozzy albums, especially this one, was made out of, like, I just find there's so much animosity kind of in the album, and maybe the era that surrounds the Osbournes, that and they're kind of, it's like reaping what you sow a little bit, and everybody loves Ozzy, but nobody really likes Sharon. So this is the reason why. I mean, I get it. She cleaned him up, and she helped him, or tried to clean him up, and helped him, and probably to some degree saved his life. But in the reverse, also really kind of, in my mind, adversely affected his career to some degree. So but anyways, yeah, it's a great song. I like it. Again, the guitar in it's phenomenal, and but I just the name of it could be. I'd go with the original title.
Well, as we were all mentioning lyrics or not, or what the song might be about, I'm reading somebody's comments saying it's about a pirate. Because he's talking about searching for gold, but then I got to thinking it might be some guy who's high and thinks he's a pirate. So I don't know where these people get this. But yeah, and there is that saying, sailing across the ocean or around the ocean or whatever. And yeah, I see the Sharon Osbourne name thing on there. I thought maybe it stood for Sharon Axe the Oz, is what I thought it was for. As I try to come up with that. Anyway, then we finish off with I think this is like a masterpiece Ozzy Osbourne song, especially with Randy Rhoads guitar in it, but the title track, Diary of a Madman, and I forget where we are. Ken, I think I'll let you talk first.
Sure. So what's great about this song is the title, Diary of a Madman, is taken from the 1963 Vincent Price kind of gothic horror film where he's like a sculptor going mad. So there's, like, in the movie itself, just quickly, it's like there's he has his inner voice talking to him and pushing him to kill. So obviously, they took that title for this song. And this, as you said, Blake, this is a masterpiece. This is probably one of my
Yeah.
favorite Ozzy songs altogether. Um, Even right from the beginning to the end of the song, you get that acoustic, like haunting opening. And then what I like it towards the end of the song, you get those kind of operatic ahas at the end, which really accentuate that ending guitar riff. What a great song! From start to finish, this is probably one of my favorite Ozzy songs.
And Jim?
Agree, totally agree. This is what ties the whole album in. And I think this song, for me, is what makes this album for myself better than the first album. I mean, I'm talking better by just points of points. But this is, I mean, that classical sort of acoustic guitar vibe in it. It's got everything in it. It's got, I mean, it's got elements of power metal, elements of doom, elements of some acoustic classical elements, traditional metal. I think it's really, really good, and it's a really smart song. And I love the fact that they tied it in with they made this sort of masterpiece with the album's name. Being the album's name, and I could never understand why that was never really maybe it didn't get a lot of radio play, I'm not sure. Just with the many elements of the song, maybe commercially it was probably not necessarily accepted as well as like some of the other more easier to sing and easier to kind of tap your foot along song. But yeah, this is a masterpiece. My favorite song on the album, and probably one of my favorite Ozzy songs of all time. I mean, it's just that good, and I absolutely love it.
And yes, and I already said it was a masterpiece. So it kind of reminded me of like Revelation Mother Earth from the first album, kind of this feel or whatever. Sorry. And but yeah, Randy's playing in it. And Jim kind of mentioned, we probably talked about this on the Blizzard of Oz episode. And Jim, you kind of mentioned this before we started about like, it's too bad that Randy Rhoads only was on these two albums and we never got to hear what he could do. Cause I'm sure he wouldn't have stayed with Ozzy, just like you said. And he probably would have did solo albums like, like Satriani and Vi used to do. Like, I guess I still do. But it's too bad we didn't get to see what he could have did.
It's funny. Himself. You're right, 100% right. I mean, it's funny. Like every time we talk, like we did on the last podcast too with Ozzy, Ozzy with Black Sabbath, Ozzy with his solo career. It's always like Ozzy's voice is pretty good. It's very distinctive, but it's not the best metal voice out there. I mean, let's be honest. But it's his bandmates, and that's the thing. Because in the Lee Kurzweil documentary, he talked about how Ozzy had told him to go tell Sharon that he didn't want to perform 2 nights in a row or something. And that's, he thinks, the tipping point of where Sharon kind of got pissed at him. But anyways, he said he's my bandmate. He was our lead singer. So like, as Ken said, they were thinking this was an actual band. Like it wasn't just the Ozzy Osbourne kind of show. This was going to be it. And I mean, you had Randy Rhoads there, as far as I'm concerned. You could have had, I mean, yes, Ozzy's name was on it, but he was quickly being overshadowed by how well the band was. And that was the same thing in Black Sabbath as well. I mean, you had great bandmates in there. So I always feel that, and I love Ozzy stuff. I love Ozzy Black Sabbath, but I feel the talented band that has always been put together, especially in his solo career, because it was always put together. It changed kind of from album to album after this, and it kind of, they had Jakey Lee eventually, and then they just kind of kept going, where they would always bring in these people, including his last album where he had tons of guest musicians on it, which I thought was kind of cool too. That would always help him out and maybe cover a little bit of what Ozzy was maybe lacking in. And I mean, definitely, Randy Rhoads. I mean, a musical genius. I would have loved to see. I would love, it would be so cool to be thinking about how things would have changed differently and how he would have affected metal. And I honestly think he was going to head back to sort of a classical background. But could you imagine what he would have done? And it just blows you away when you think about it.
Yes. So we're gonna rate the album. Let's Jim, what do you give this album out of 10?
Oh, 10 out of 10. Definitely. This I mean, I think I even rated the last album at 10 out of 10. But I mean, this is just, I like it just that pinch more. I feel like it feels like more of a cohesive band, even though and it probably was to some degree while they were recording, even though I'm sure there was lots of interference and stuff from outside forces. But and then at the end of it, they just kind of switched it up before they went on tour. So, but I find it's, but I mean, I love the first album too. So, but this is my favorite Ozzy album out of them all.
And Ken, what would you give it out of 10?
I'm actually wanting to give it a 9, but after listening to both you guys talk about Randy Rhoads, I'll give it a 10 as well, because I think the guitars save it. There's a couple songs where they're okay, but they're not memorable. But the guitar licks are, and those riffs are great. So I will give it a 10 as well.
Okay, well, if I was gonna rate it on the fact that Randy Rhoads is on it, yes, I would give it a 10 too. But some of the songs, I like the first album better. I don't know. I feel it was more heavier maybe for me. I don't know. But so I'd only give this one 7.5.
Okay.
And I'm not really a big Ozzy fan, which we might have mentioned in the last episode and maybe some Black Sabbath episode too. I never really liked Ozzy that much, but that might be part of Sharon ruining it for me too, possibly.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, now this album did peak at number 17 in Canada, number 14 in the United Kingdom, and number 16 in the United States. And those are the only countries it has on this chart, though. But it went platinum in Canada and it went triple platinum in the United States.
Yeah, awesome.
And so, so we're going to get to our top 10 list today. And we thought we'd try to do something a little different since we're talking about a guitar hero, guitar god, whatever you want to call it. We're going to do our top 10 guitarist or our top 10 guitar teams. So it just depends which way everybody went. I didn't give specific like rules on this. I just said, like, if you wanted to say Iron Maiden instead of saying Adrian Smith, you could say that. Or if you wanted to say like Judas Priest instead of maybe KK Downing is your guy, but you want to just say Judas Priest, you could do that, or you could just pick single guitar guys. So I'm going to let Jim, I guess, go first, and you can start at your number 10. Hopefully I have 10, but yes, start at your number 10.
Well, this was a hard list to do because unfortunately I'm leaving some guitar gods off it, and it tore me apart. So, but I mean, that number 10, I have to put this in here. I went with Alexi Laiho from Children of Bodom because I'm on a humongous Children of Bodom kick right now. And I mean, he is one of my favorite vocalists and guitarists. So I'll give him a nod there for sure. Number 9, obviously, I went with a duo, only one duo on my list. So I went with Judas Priest, KK Downing, and Glenn Tipton. I mean, I both guitar gods in their own right. I mean, wow, what a band to just have two of these guys on the same stage at a time. And I love KK Priest's new stuff that he put out this year and a couple years ago. I absolutely, it's probably
Jim.
some of my top. Number 8, I go with Alex Lifeson. So, with some, I got to throw some Rush on there, and for that. Number 7, Page. This was my sort of, I threw this in for Blake because he's such a Zeppelin fan. 6 for me is
Jim,
Michael
sorry,
Schenker.
Jim, you're breaking up a little bit.
All his stuff he's done with his band. Number
Jim, Jim's gone.
Oh no.
Well, he was breaking up there. I think he said Jimmy Page. Sorry, we lost you. You were breaking up there.
Okay. What was the last thing I said? Sorry, guys.
I think you said number 7 was Jimmy Page. Is that right?
Yeah, and I was going on about how I picked them because I know you're such a great big Zeppelin fan. So, but I like Zeppelin as well too. Number 6 is Michael Schenker. Love Michael Schenker. Love all his incarnations of his bands. I think he's a talented guitar player. Number 5 probably will piss some people off because he's so high in my list, but I love Yngwie Malmsteen, and I love Yngwie. And I know everybody's like, every time I say it online, like I bought some Ingve albums to fill in some of my back catalog, and I was debating whether I even want to put them online because I was like, maybe I don't want to. I'm going to get people, Jimmy, what are you doing? But I think he's great, and I mean, I absolutely think he's a genius. Number 4, Tommy Iommi from obviously Black Sabbath. I don't need to say anything. And then I get down to my top 3. I mean, this was a hard one to go with, and I picked number 3 is Richie Blackmore, even though it could have easily been my 2. Number 2, I went with Eddie Van Halen. I mean, I love Van Halen, but I mean, he's another guitar god. My number 1 obviously is Randy Rhoads, and I would, when I did the list, no matter whatever list I do for guitarists, it's always Randy first. So, and then just fill in everybody else. But I probably could have put Richie even a second because, I mean, I love what he did with Be Purple and Rainbow. So, I mean, it's awesome. So that's my list. Sorry, guys, I must have lost you, but it jumped right back on. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, okay. I was trying to stop you from talking because I wasn't sure what you said for number 7. Then you were gone, but then you came back. So anyway, the funny thing, you mentioned Eddie Van Halen and then Randy Rhoads. We probably talked about this in the last episode where supposedly they didn't like each other. And yeah. somebody put a picture of Eddie Van Halen on Richie, or Eddie Van Halen on Randy's, either his wah-wah pedal or his distortion pedal, so that he could stomp on his face while he was playing guitar or something. I don't know. But I don't know how true that is, but I heard that. So, Ken, we'll let you go now with your top 10 list.
Okay, so I did something that's veering off a bit different from what you guys have probably done. So I've stuck with the idea of dual guitarists for bands that I think work with the two people creatively in a band. So for me, number 10, I'm picking George Lynch and Jeff Pilson for Dokken. I love Dokken. I grew up with him in the 80s. And I'm putting him on that list because of their association and their continual partnership years later. They still make music together. So I think that's kind of an important, like, it's not Dokken, but they're still creating new music to this day. So that's why I got them on my list. Cool. Now, number 9, I'm putting another great band called Cacophony, Jason Becker and Marty Friedman, when they were part of the Jim Varney Shrapnel record days. They only put out 2 albums, Speed Metal Sympathy and Go Off, but 2 amazing albums of pure guitar goodness. 80s guitar rock. I love it. At number 8. So at number 8, I went with I went with Anders Borler and Martin Larsson from At the Gates, and I love those 2 guys. They're such a great band. I know that they only had a couple albums and disappeared, and now they're back playing music. But I love their partnership. They trade off well with each other. Number 7, I'm going to go with Exodus, and that would be Gary Holt and Lee Altus, which are fabulous. Lee Altus is such a great guitar player, and I'm glad that he joined the band because he's really elevated that band with his style of playing. And, what can you say about Holt? Holt is one of the veterans in the thrash scene. Great pairing. Number 6, I'm putting Testament, so I'm going to go with Eric Peterson and Alex Skolnick, who, again, really, they've made so much great music together. I love the band, and it works well for me. At number 5, I'm putting Judas Priest, so it's Glenn Tipton and KK Downing. Again, 2 classic guitar players, great sound, made a lot of great music together. At number 4, I'm going to go with Metallica, so James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett. Again, they play well together. Metallica needs no further introduction. We all know what they're capable of doing and what they've done. At number 3, I'm going to go with Shadows Fall. Now, Jonathan Donay and Matt Banchin are 2 guitar players that I absolutely love. I love this band. It's just a shame that they're unable to play as a band now because of financial issues. So each of them all split up and gone to other bands. One good thing I'll say is that Jonathan is now in Anthrax, and I love Anthrax, so that's a big coup for them to get him because he's such a monster guitar player. At number 2, I'm going to go with, where's my number 2 here? I'm sorry, why am I lost here? Number 2, number 1. Sorry, guys, I wrote this down. At number 2, yes, sorry. At number 2, I'm going to be putting Iron Maiden on my list. So Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. What more can you say about those two? Great band altogether. And of course, my number 1, I'm going to put Dave Mustaine and Marty Friedman from Megadeth. That's a great era of the band that I totally love. I totally love. So that's how I came up with my list.
That's good list. Now I mostly have single guys. But I'm just gonna start. And mine are probably mostly old. I guess some of your guys are old too, but number 10, I went because it wasn't, I don't know, because there's a lot of guys I'm gonna leave it. I mean, I liked Yngwie too back in the day, and whatever. There's a whole bunch of guys. I'm sure Eddie Van Halen is good, but he's not on my list. But there's so many that could be on the list. So it's mostly like just, it's my favorite, maybe not my favorite bands, because I don't have Faith No More on here because I don't really care about the guitarist of Faith No More. I care about the singer. But anyway, so number 10, I got Annihilators, Jeff Waters, just because I love his thrash riffing so much. Not so much, I mean, I'm sure there's good solos too, but I just always, like every Annihilator album, there's always some great riffing on it. So I thought I'd throw a Canadian in here because I'm pretty sure that's my only Canadian on the list. And I don't think anybody else had any Canadian. Oh, you had Alex Lifeson. I guess he's Canadian too. So there's 2. Number 9, I got Deep Purple's Richie Blackmore.
Nice.
And number 8, I got John 5 from, well, he's in Motley Crue now. I don't really want to say that, but he is. but I mostly, it's for his solo stuff, of course, his instrumental guitar albums that he's got. And he's got the horror theme going on. And I can't remember the name of the last album, but he's got some great albums and he's a great player. He used to play with Marilyn Manson, I believe.
Yeah.
Who I also liked. And so I love John 5, and I think he's kind of being held back if he's going to stay in Motley Crue. I think he needs to just go on his own and not be playing, Motley Crue songs live. Okay, number 7, I got Randy Rhoads from here. Number 6, I have 2 in a row of solo instrumental guitar guys. Steve Vai is my number 6, even though I guess there has been some singing in some of his albums, but mostly just, solo guitar stuff, because I think he was amazing back. Well, I guess he's still going at it too, but especially in the 80s. I saw David Lee Roth play twice. I like David Lee Roth, but I was there to see Steve Vai play all the stuff that he could play. And Billy Sheehan was on the bass too in those bands. So that's mostly why I was there to see Dave, even though I did like Dave. He was a funny character. And number 5, I got the other guy, Joe Satriani. And I actually saw the G3 tour once with both of them playing. And I love Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien album. Great album. And I guess he also used to teach Kirk Hammett of Metallica, if I remember correctly. Yep. Number 4, this is my most, even though this band has also been around for 20 plus years, but they're the newest, except for John 5. I guess he might be younger than this is. But anyway, Arch Enemy, because I love Arch Enemy and I love their playing. They're like melodic death metal, of course. And they're playing, so I'm humming along to the guitar licks and stuff that they're doing. Jeff Loomis, ex of Nevermore, of course, and Michael Amott, who I believe was in Carcass before he got into Arch Enemy. But I just love those 2 guys and their solos and everything. I just love seeing them play live, those guys. Number 3, I have Jimmy Page, of course, from Led Zeppelin, and I'm not going to say anything about that. As Jim already said, that I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan, so I had to have him in there. Number 2, I got Dream Theater's John Petrucci, as I probably saw Dream Theater play live like 10 times, and I just thought I think the whole band, of course, is amazing at their instruments. But yeah, I love John Petrucci. I remember one time watching a video on YouTube. I think he was doing a guitar clinic, probably at Berkeley, where he went to school. And he was up on the stage and there was just people watching him. And he played something for like a minute on his guitar. And then, he stopped and everyone clapped or whatever. And then he said, okay, that was at half speed. Now I'm going to play at full speed. And then everybody in the crowd just like gasped and went, what? Because they couldn't believe that was just at half speed. But yes, he's an amazing guitarist. And first I put down Kirk Hammett. Then I thought, oh, maybe I should say Metallica because James is a big part of the band too, like Ken already said. And I'm going back to the classic 80s albums, the first 4 or whatever albums, and just the great guitar work and the solos. I love Kirk Hammett solos. I would always play air guitar to those first few albums and then get a guitar and pretend I could do those solos. But of course I couldn't. And I think that's my list. And I think this is one of the things I miss about music today is these guitar heroes and guitar gods. It doesn't seem like it's as prominent today. I'm not saying there's not good guitarists, of course. But it's just they don't stand out as much as they used to back in the 80s. And because you would hear Randy Rhoads and say, oh, that's Randy Rhoads. Or you would hear Angus Young of AC/DC and go, oh, that's Angus Young. But now there's so many bands and so much talent that it's hard to tell them apart until you hear the singer. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that. But
the interesting thing is in the Kerslake documentary, he was self-taught by years, so he wasn't properly trained as a drummer. So he said that a lot of musicians now, guitarists, drummers, every musician that are not self-taught like they were back in the old days, they're all technically proficient in their craft, which makes them, so you have this guy who's a great drummer or this guy who's a great guitarist took the same lessons as this person who's a great guitarist and a great drummer. So it's you hit it on the head. They're very technically proficient, but they all sound very similar. There's not that difference of how it is. And when you hear sort of a lot of the background from drum, basses, guitars, they're not properly trained back in the old days, and they learned it by ear, or they learned it by what did he call it? He was drumming and he said, I learned it by being the parrot, just copying it like a parrot. So it's pretty neat. And they were talking about that, and they were talking about guitarists and bass players, and they were saying that, these guys know everything about it, know how to read sheets of music, and know how to do this and know how to do that. But they also, so does the next band, so does the next band. And you hit it on the head there for sure, Blake.
Ken, did you want to add any of that part?
So the other point that I would make is that modern music is very, it's so digitized these days. So everything gets as much more homogenized as how it not used to be. So, so you get a lot of that originality kind of cut down, and it doesn't sound as good. So it sounds more processed. And so every band does sound the same. So you don't get like a guitar legend, like as we've been discussing here for the last hour. And that's where I think is one of the biggest differences with modern music, Blake. And I get your point earlier saying why you don't listen to a lot of modern metal. And I would agree. I mean, I run my own website as well and work for you guys and do work for the Metal Pit. But I have the same opinion. I get a lot of music sent my way, and it's like, it's all right, but it doesn't grab me in a way that I would have found myself in the 80s when you're hearing all these bands, and it's like, oh wow, and you're blown away. So yeah, I think that's a large part of it. I think the digital age has changed the way that music is perceived and heard.
And there's like so many bands now too, and people listen. The younger people will listen to stuff differently than we do. Like we might put on our vinyl still, but then they're listening on Spotify or whatever, and they maybe are listening to a playlist instead of listening to an album. And like there could be a group, whoever it is, that might be one of the best groups, but they probably can't name any of the band members. They just know what the group's called. Like they can't say, oh, the guitarist, I love the guitarist name, whatever, John Doe. He's amazing, whatever. He's just going to say, oh, I love that band's guitarist, because they don't know the names anymore and stuff. At least that's what I think. Because again, yeah, they don't stand out. Like back in the 80s, we had all these magazines, Hit Parade or Circus, whatever, and they would always do their reader polls. And so you'd always see it year after year. You'd see the same guys like Eddie Van Halen, Randy Rhoads. Well, Randy Rhoads only for a few years, I guess, but you would see Eddie Van Halen and Angus Young and Jimmy Page and then Kirk Hammett and Dave Mustaine, whatever. So you'd see the same guys, but I don't even know if any sites or magazines do those kinds of reader polls anymore, because there's just so many people out there. People are just going to pick their favorite band. If somebody likes Cannibal Corpse, they're going to look up, okay, who's the guitarist name in Cannibal Corpse? I'll put him down. Or whatever. So there's just, that's a lost art, I find. And some of these bands don't even play guitar solos anymore. They just kind of riff through the whole thing. And so that's what I miss about the modern day music, is because I love the guitar, and like that's how I got into music. Like I would go see whatever Steve Vai and just be amazed at watching him play, and that would make me want to learn how to play it, or try to learn how to play the guitar, or make me want to go buy a guitar or whatever. But if I don't go to many shows anymore, but if I did, there's not many bands that's going to make me, like if I was back being a 20-year-old or whatever, I don't think I'm going to watch a show and think, oh, I want to play the guitar, because like we already said, a lot of them sound the same. Like they don't stand out.
And then you have a band like Ghost who's ripping up so popularity, but the guitarist is a ghoul. We don't even know who he is. It doesn't. I mean, I know it's all around Tobias Forge, but still, I like to know who's in the members of the band, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like Ghost, is because I think it's just him and a bunch of session players he probably pays $300 a night to. So
Good point.
Yeah, I don't know much about Ghosts. I know I don't like them, but that's about all I know. But anyway, anything to add about this, about Randy Rhoads or anything else? Ozzy, anything?
Well, if Randy was here, I'm assuming he would have had an amazing career. Based on the last Ozzy album that he was on, you could see that he was on the start of something great for sure, epic sounding, and who knows where it would have been. It's just something we can speculate for hours, but yeah, I think he would have went on to a really, really good career.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, it is a big loss that we didn't get to see where he would have went. So anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm going to mention here, so coming up next week, we're going to stay in the year 1981. I don't know why we're in this rut of staying in 1981, but let's see, me, Jim, and Stacia are going to be doing Venom's first album. Sorry, the first album, Welcome to Hell. Cool. Since that will be the last episode before Christmas, I thought it was fitting to have Welcome to Hell be the conversation. Okay, I don't know what that means. Don't be offended. I didn't mean anything by that. I'm sure Venom likes Christmas too. Anyway, so that's the next episode. So thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. See you next week.